Hello everyone, welcome to another part in this Call of Duty style loadout system tutorial series. Today we're going to take a look at how to create our actual loadouts that we created in our previous tutorial and assign it to each and every single custom loadout slot here. It dynamically updates all of the weapons and the content inside of it based on how we have previously set up. Again, if you like this type of content, please hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel because we have more and more videos in this tutorial series coming up soon. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's get into the video now. Now, let's start with setting up our actual variables in our loadouts. So the first variable that we have is the actual name. So we're going to go ahead on this detail panel. We're going to name this primary underscore name underscore txt to indicate that this is a text variable, and then set this as a variable. Next we have is the actual image. So here we're going to name this primary underscore img. That's our variable. And now we have our class name for the sidearm. So we're going to name this sidearm underscore name underscore text. Select this is variable. Select the image. And then this would be sidearm underscore img. And make sure that's a variable as well. Next is our melee. So we're going to go melee underscore name underscore text. Make it a type variable. And then select the image and then name this melee underscore img. And then that would be a variable. Here, lethals, we're not going to change it, but the image we're going to change. This would be lethals underscore img. Again, same for tacticals. We're going to name this tacticals underscore img. And for the perks, we're going to select the class name here, and then we're just going to name it perk 1. And then for the second one, it's going to be perk 2. And the third one would be perk 3. And then we're going to select the image and name it perk 1 underscore image. And then for the second one, we're going to do perk 2 underscore image. And for the third one is perk 3 underscore image. Now let's make sure you compile and save this. Now let's open up our graph. And let's do all of this on the event construct. If you open up your BPC loadout system, after we set up our default loadouts, we need to communicate to this loadout widget, notifying which index actually contains what loadout information and such. And again, we don't want to do a casting. We want to communicate it efficiently. So we're going to go to our BPI loadout interface that we already have, and then add in a new function and then name this notify underscore BPC loadout. And this will have an input. And this input would be our loadout array and will be of type loadout struct. And then instead of single, make this of a type array because we want to send the entire array information over. And now we can go ahead and close this after saving and compiling. After we are done setting up the defaults, we want to drag off this and say get all widgets with interface and put in our BPI underscore loadout interface. And now right click and say notify BPC loadout message will pop up. Connect the execution pin here, and then also this found widgets, the entire thing just connected here as the target. And the loadout array, we're going to connect our loadout struct here. And let's make sure that we do this only after our default loadout is set up, so all the information has been stored into the struct. Then we notify the loadout that the struct is ready. Back in our actual loadouts, so this is our actual loadout screen. We're going to go ahead and go to the class settings. And then right here where it says implemented interfaces, we're going to go ahead and implement our loadout interface. And now you will notice that the notify BPC loadout option is here. So we're going to right click and go ahead and say implement event. And this, we're going to go and drag off of this array, and then we're going to promote it to a variable. And that will be of type loadout array. And then that's it. So when the game starts, the BPC loadout system will send a message with all the loadout information, and then the widget will take it and then store it as an array. On the event construct, we need to know which index of this loadout array we need to construct. So I'm going to create a new variable and then name this index. and then make this of type integer. Make sure this is instance editable and also exposed on spawn. Compile and save. Now on event construct, we're going to drag this loadout array, get, and then we're going to go ahead and say get a reference of this loadout array at this index, right? We're going to connect our index so we know which index we're getting it. And this, we're going to go ahead and break this loadout struct, and that will give us information about our primary weapon, secondary weapon, sidearm, and all such. Now I'm going to move this event construct a little bit to the bottom here. So let's start setting it up. So first thing is our primary weapon. So I'm going to drag off of this and then break this primary weapon. And what we need is the name and the portrait. And also we need the class. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and get our primary name text, drag it in here, get, and then drag off of this and say set text. And connect this event construct onto the text. And we're going to go ahead, drag this in text, and then make it a format text. We're going to add two squiggly brackets, which is called the parentheses. And in between these squiggly brackets, we're going to go ahead and add in a space, and then a straight line, and then another space. The straight line is the key that is right below the backspace. And if you hold on shift and hit that key, you will get a straight line, or you will get a backslash, right? So that's on the same key. And inside of this first parentheses, we're going to put in class. And the second parentheses, we're going to put in name. And if I press outside of the box now, you will now get two input options on our format text. So we're going to use this input option. So we're going to take our name and then connect it to the name. And our weapon class, we can't connect it directly into the class. So we need to do a enum to string. So there's an enum to string option or enum to name option. We can do enum to name and then connect it in here. Okay, so I just moved it around just to make it a little bit tidy. There's going to be a lot of connections here, so it is going to get a little messy. So we want to try to keep it as tidy as possible so it doesn't get too confusing. And now we're also going to grab our primary image, which is right here, and get primary image. And then we're going to go ahead and say set texture, or set brush, sorry. Set brush from texture. There you go. And if you're using the material instance, you would actually go ahead and drag off this and say set brush from material, and then you would select your material instance here. But we're going to use our texture. So we're going to go ahead and connect this. And the actual texture would come from our portrait. We have already set this up. Compile and save. And now this break weapon info, we can go ahead and hide the unconnected pins because we no longer need anything else from this. And that is it for our primary weapon. Now this would set up our primary weapon loadouts based on what's the actual index that is being sent in. We're going to go ahead and do our sidearm now. Drag off of our sidearm and then say break. And now we're going to grab our sidearm image, get, and then also the sidearm name and text, get. For the text, we're going to go ahead and copy this set text and also the format text. We already have it made up here, and we're going to just Control C to copy and then Control V to paste it, and then just connect the text target here. And again, we will get the class name and also the name set up here. So the name will go into the name. The class would actually be just pistol, right? So I can go ahead and then remove this as pistol. Now, if you would like, you could always create an enumeration and then add it to your sidearm info, just like how we did our assault rifles and stuff here for the weapon class. And then you can set that as a class up here. So it's the same idea, but here we haven't set up a class for our pistol. We just made one pistol and that was that. So that's why you don't see a class here. I'm going to go ahead and get the execution pin from our primary setup and then connect it to the sidearm. And the sidearm image, again, drag off of this and say set brush from texture. And then connect this execution pin first. And then we're going to get our portrait and then plug it in here. And then now we can select this sidearm info and then go ahead and hide unconnected pins. Now we're going to, let me just move this notify up here so it's out of the way. Now we can do our melee. Same thing, we need our melee image and also the melee name and text. Let me move the image out here. I'm going to go ahead and copy the set text from our sidearm. It's zigzag. And then I'm going to connect the melee text here. And then the actual, in the format, instead of pistol, I'm going to go ahead and put in melee. And then the name. So here, off of our loadout struct, we're going to get our melee. And then let's go ahead and break it. Take our name and then plug it into the name. And for the melee image, I'm going to copy this brush from texture. And then connect the target here. And plug in all of these execution pins. The set text will be coming from the brush from the previous setup. And connect that execution pin. And we're going to connect our portrait in here. Now I know it gets a lot messy, and to clean this up really quickly, what you could do is you can go ahead and select all of the components that belongs to a setup, and then you can just select all of this, right click on this, and then we're going to say collapse node. And this would be primary setup. And then you can just put it up here. That makes it that much cleaner. And again, sidearm, we're done setting up the sidearm. So we're going to go ahead, right click, and then collapse node. And then we're going to name this sidearm setup. We're done with the melee, but we want to copy this text and the brush from it. So we're going to go ahead and set the next one before we collapse the melee. So next one is our lethals. So we're going to drag our lethals down. And then we're going to go ahead and break. And we're going to grab our lethals image. So we're going to go ahead for this lethals image, copy this brush texture, set brush from texture, and connect the lethals target here, and also the portrait here, and connect this execution pin out here. So now that the lethals is done, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this melee information, right click, collapse the node, and then I'm going to name this melee setup. Put it out here. Now, same thing for tacticals. Tactical only has the image at this time. Get tacticals image. Copy this brush from texture. Set the target. And then get our tacticals out. And then break. Get tactical portrait. And then plug it in here. And then the set brush texture from the lethals, we're going to connect the execution pin here. We're going to go ahead and collapse our lethals here. And then say lethals setup. Let's put it out there. Okay. Tacticals is good. And then for the perk 1, we're going to go ahead and drag the perk 1 here, then say break, and then get the perk 1 image, and then set brush from texture. Connect our target here. Then go ahead and connect this in here. And the portrait, we're just gonna plug into portrait. We're gonna go ahead and collapse our tacticals, right click, and then collapse to node. We're gonna say tacticals setup. This set brush from texture, I'm going to copy it 2 more times. This would be for our perk 2 and perk 3. Grab my perk 2 image and then plug it into the target here. Grab my perk 3 image, plug it into the target. And then the perk 2 info, I'm going to go ahead and break it. Perk 3 info, I'm going to go ahead and then break it here as well. And all we need is the portrait for now. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the portrait for all of this and start connecting the execution print from one to another. Select our perks and then just click on hide unconnected pins for now. If you ever want to go ahead and undo this hide unconnected pins, you can always click on this arrow and then they'll give you all the pins for your from your structure. So you can go ahead and then select it for it to show. That's how you would make it come back. So select all of these perks, right click, and then collapse node, and then we're going to name this perk setup. And now we can move this up here. Now again, this is a lot of information that is being set up here, and it takes up a lot of the room here. So I'm going to select this whole thing and then right click on it, and I'm going to go ahead and say collapse node and name this loadout construct. Again, our entire graph is sitting inside of here, as you can see, and then each and every single graph is also set up inside of here as well. So everything is set up properly, and we are done with the loadouts for now. We're going to come back here and make some tweaks as we go through this tutorial series. But for the concept of it, we're done setting up our loadout. So just a quick recap, what we have done is we've actually created an index and also our loadout array. The loadout array is being updated by our interface function. As soon as the game starts, the BPC loadout system is going to go ahead and set up all of our default loadouts. And immediately after that, it's going to send out the information with the loadout struct over to the widget. And the widget through the interface, it's going to get that loadout array and then set it as a variable. And we also have an index setup, and we're going to go ahead and send this index information through other interfaces. And this is how we're going to switch between our loadouts and such. And then using that index, we go ahead and get the index from this loadout array and get the information of the primary, secondary, and such. And we're going to go ahead and set up their name and their image. Again, feel free to add more content to this. You could always add in much more information than what I have added. What I want to show you here is what's the concept of getting it done. And then from here onwards, you just need to build upon it to make it suit your game. So that's all we have done here. So let's go ahead and close our loadouts for now. So back in our content drawer, go out to your loadout system folder, go to your UI, and we're going to go to the loadout button. This is the button that we're going to be using to actually populate our loadout. So this button, we're going to go ahead and select our button here. And then if you scroll down, there's an option for on hovered and also on clicked. So we want to select, click on hovered. When it's hovered, we want to go ahead and create that loadout. Even when it's hovered or clicked, doesn't matter. We want to go ahead and create that loadout. So on hovered, I want to send out an information or a notification through an interface and then notify our loadouts to build that specific loadout with that specific index. Now, if you remember, we are actually sending in the loadout index information through our loadouts container. If you remember this code, we're sending our loadout from 1 all the way through to 5. And this same index, we can use it to retrieve that information as well. So first things first, I'm going to go to our interface, which is in our blueprints folder, BPI loadout. And I'm going to add in a new function. And this one's going to be starting with UI to notify that this is going to be a communication between the UI. And I'm going to say UI underscore on hovered. On this on hovered, I'm going to have in an input. An input would be our index. So we can notify which loadout class have we hovered over. And in our loadout button, on hovered, when we hover over that button, we're going to go ahead and say, and then right click and type in get all widgets with interface. This would be our BPI underscore loadout. And then right click here, and then we're going to go ahead and search for UI underscore on hovered. You will get a message. Plug this in, and the found widgets, we're going to plug it into the target, and then drag this loadout index and then plug it in here. This loadout index is already set by our loadout container. So this loadout index will go from anywhere from 1 to 5, which will then correlate to this loadout defaults that we have previously set up. Now that we have notified on hovered, we also want to notify something on unhovered. So when the player unhovers from this button, we want to go ahead back to our designer, click on the button, and then there's an option for on unhovered. We're going to click on the plus button here, and we're going to go to our BPI loadout and do the exact same thing. Add in a new function, and then we're going to say UI underscore on unhovered, or we're going to say UI underscore unhovered. This would take an index as well. We need to notify which loadout did we just unhover from. And in this on unhovered button, again, we can copy this get all widgets with interface. And then we're going to go ahead and say UI underscore unhovered. And this would be our index, would be our loadout index here. And then connect the target. And one last thing that we want to do is on our designer, we also want to create one for when we click it. So on clicked, we're going to click on this plus. And then again, we're going to go to our interface and then add in a new function. And then this would be UI underscore on clicked. We need to know which index did we just click on. So that would be our index. Compile and save. And then go back to our loadout button. And then we're going to again copy this get all widgets with interface. Paste it in here. And then we're going to right click and say UI underscore on clicked. That would be that one with the message. Make sure it's a message icon, okay? Connect the execution pin, connect the array to the target, and then connect the loadout index to this. So now, effectively, on hovered, this message will fire, And on unhovered, it's going to fire out the message for unhovered with the index. And then on clicked, it's also going to fire out a message with on clicked. Now we're going to go to our content browser, go back to our loadout system, UI, and then we need the pause menu. So now we need to modify this loadouts, right? W loadouts container based on our input that we just received. Right click on this W loadouts, and then we're going to wrap it with a wrap box. We can go ahead and now remove the actual loadouts from here. So let's go to our graph here, go to the class settings, and then implemented interfaces. Let's go ahead and add our BPI underscore loadout. Compile and save. Now on our interface, we should have our on-clicked, hovered, and unhovered. So we're going to right-click on the hovered, implement event. And in our designer, we need to actually make this wrap box into a container and also a variable. To name that, we're just going to name it as loadout container and then make this of type variable. Compile and save. Now back in our graph, on this UI hovered, what we're going to do is first we're going to get our loadout container. And we want to make sure that we're only creating the widget once, so it's not sitting on top of each other and stuff. So we're going to take our loadout container and let's make sure that we say clear children. What this will do is if there's any widget inside of this loadout container, it would get rid of it. And now we're going to go ahead and say create widget. And this would be our loadouts widget that we have. And the index would be coming directly from the event hovered. This tells us which loadout we have actually selected. And this, we're going to drag our loadout container again here. And we're going to go ahead and say add child. And there's an option add child to wrap box. Connect the execution pin here and the return value to the content. And when we get the message UI unhovered, we're going to go ahead and say implement event. And we're going to get our loadout container and we're going to clear children. So this will get rid of everything. This is going to provide us with this opportunity to take a look at logical callouts. Let me explain what that means. If I now go ahead and press play, and if I press T to open up my pause menu, and then if I select the loadout, I have all of my custom loadouts. Now if I hover over it, you notice that the loadout is showing up, and when I stop hovering, the loadout goes away. This is what we have done with the clear children. Why is that? Let's talk about the logical callouts. In our BPC loadout system, once we have done setting up our loadout defaults and setting up our loadout struct, we're calling out the actual notification. However, when we call out this notification, the actual loadouts is not present in the actual level. This loadout is not a persistent level. What that means is once this loadout gets opened and closed, it's going to destroy all of the information that's inside of it. And it's going to rebuild its information only when it gets constructed. So when we send this notification out and the loadout, because it's not present in the world, this information never gets through to the loadouts. So this is what a logical callout is. So if you ever were to call out anything using an interface, and if it is not working, take a look at when you are calling out and where in the world is the actual widget or blueprint or whatever the case may be. If the loadout or the widget is not present in the world, no matter how much you do, the callout will never go through unless you go ahead and do a casting. The casting will actually go through when the widget gets opened up. And we want to stay away from casting, right? Because casting is very heavy and expensive process. So there's a workaround to this. The workaround is in our first person character, we have our input action for opening and closing the actual loadout. And we also have a reference to the pause menu. So what we could do is when the pause menu gets generated, we can send in our loadout information to the pause menu and then have the pause menu communicated over to the actual loadout when it is creating the widget. Let me show you how this is done. So first we're going to go to our actual loadouts. We can remove this notify BPC loadout array for now, compile and save. We're going to take this loadout array that we have created and then make this instance editable and also expose on spawn. Compile and save. In our pause menu, we can go to this loadout widgets, right click, and now if you click on refresh, you'll get the loadout array here. Now all you have to do is just drag this and then promote it to a variable as loadout array. Again, make this instance editable and also expose on spawn. So when this gets developed, when we are developing it, we're going to send in the loadout array information. And now in our first person character, where we actually create our pause menu, if you click on the pause menu widget and right click and now refresh, you'll get the loadout array because we made it instance editable and exposed on spawn. Now we can go ahead and say, drag our BPC loadout system and then get our loadout struct here, and we can connect this here. Now, every time you open the loadout, it's going to go and get the loadout or struct information, and then it's going to pass it on to the pause menu. It's almost like a refresh. And now our loadout array is now defined. So if I go ahead and if I press play, and if I press T, and then get the loadout, and if I hover over it, you'll notice that the images are showing up properly. Now, I noticed 3 issues with this. First issue is obviously the alignment. It is not properly aligned. It's not within the screen. Number 2, the class name, the weapon class name is not properly showing up. And number 3 is loadout 1 is supposed to be our AR, not the submachine gun. If I go to my BPC loadout system, if I go to my default loadout system, index 0 is supposed to be AR1. But if you remember, in our actual loadout container, when we build our loop, we're building it from first index 1 all the way up to the count of loadouts that we have. To fix this first, all we have to do is go to our loadouts, and then where we do our loadout construct, where we did all of this, get this index, and then subtract 1 from it. So subtract, and we're going to subtract 1. And then plug this as our index. And now if I go ahead and press play, if I press T, loadout, and if I hover, you see the AR, and then number 2 is our submachine gun, our machine gun, shotgun, and our sniper. We haven't really defined loadout number 6. So that's why you're getting this error. So we can go ahead and define our loadout number 6 as well, right? So here, we're going to go to our loadout size and then make this 6. So the 6th loadout gets implemented. I'm going to go ahead and copy our AR here. Copy and then paste it. And then now we can send that widget information and then make this index 5. Compile and save. Now if I go into game, press T, loadout, hover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have your AR. And there's no more errors. That's all the error was. The error was looking for information about the last loadout and it wasn't present. Now let's take a look at issue number 2. When we set up our class name, it's not properly setting up the class name here. So we're actually doing an enum to name. So if I take this class and then search for enum to string, and this string, if I were to connect it in here, compile and save, if I press play, T, loadout, and if I open up the layout, the actual class is showing up properly. You can see assault rifle, SMG, LMG, shotgun, sniper rifle, and such. So that fixes our problem number 2. And then the third problem that we had was the actual alignment of it. So if I go to the pause menu, I notice that the wrap box container is looking pretty good. Let's set up the anchors first. Proper anchors are always good. And then size this as such. And then the scale, we're going to make it about 0.8 on both sides. Set up the anchors properly. And if I press play, T, loadout, hover, and I see my loadouts properly here. That's all it takes. And then again, currently this box is rather large. So I'm going to size this smaller and move it out here. And then also our loadout container, I'm going to go ahead and move it right beside this and then do my anchors properly as well. So now if I go ahead, compile, and then press play, should look okay. Custom loadout, and there it is. Loadout number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Everything looks really good. So now we have fixed all of our 3 problems and also taken a look at how to do our logical callouts. So folks, I think this is a great spot for us to stop this video and then move on to our next video. In our next video series, we're going to now work with our scene and then update our scene while we hover or when we click on the actual loadouts. Again, if you like this tutorial series, please hit that like button because it really helps the channel grow and reach out to much more developers just like you. And also, if you have any concerns or comments, you can feel free to leave it in the comment section and I'll definitely respond to it. Again, once again, thank you very much for stopping by and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.